hence why, timesheet records are, even more important or critical. And I think a good way to think about it, or a good question for businesses and people to ask themselves is, if Fair Work was to audit you tomorrow, like, would your records hold up or stand the test or be in line with compliance and all of these changes? So
Smarter times, stronger teams. Welcome to the BundyPlus Podcast.
all right, welcome back, everybody. I've got Steve with me. We're up to episode 11. Steve, how's it going?
By yourself, is it 11? Wow.
Yeah. We're in double figures.
Oh,
And
awesome.
being as though we're almost at the mid-year point, end of financial year becomes a bit of a discussion or talking point. So I thought that would be a good topic of conversation for today. And I know for most people, end of financial year, probably just, the first thought is like lodging tax returns. And even though that's all important, there's a lot more to it than that, especially as it relates to us and time tracking and time and attendance. I think this is a pretty important or critical time to, review your time and attendance processes, being compliant in terms of employee records, and especially regulation changes, which we've touched on in one of the previous episodes about the introduction of Payday Super, or the changes in the way superannuation is handled. You've also got your, what do we call it? The qualifying earnings changes, and essentially more ATO visibility. I think that's going to be required, wage theft laws, a whole host of, I guess, changes or things to be considered at this time of the year. So, hence why, timesheet records are, even more important or critical. And I think a good way to think about it, or a good question for businesses and people to ask themselves is, if Fair Work was to audit you tomorrow, like, would your records hold up or stand the test or be in line with compliance and all of these changes? So with all that in mind, what's your take on that in terms of end of financial year? And we can maybe segue into some of those changes like Payday Super that we touched on, and qualifying earnings.
Yeah, for sure. End of the financial year is definitely an interesting time, and it's probably different for business owners versus employees. Employees are trying to get as much super in as they can or legally can, and employers are trying to get as many deductions as they can. And I suppose, as you touched on, this year is it's super different for many with the Payday Super coming in. Having all your systems in place, and there was a recent stats, we've seen a couple of reports that so many people aren't ready yet. So if I was to be spending any time, that's what I'd be looking at those changes that you need to go through. But yeah, end of financial, it's definitely time to really sit back and have a look at your entire systems as well. How well is your payroll run? Is there any improvements you can make? Is there any additional ways we can capture people's times more accurate, more easily processed? Because at the end of the day, with the payroll super, it means that basically your super has to be done every pay cycle. So the amount of time that you had before is now really super compressed into what is, a much shorter time. That before, if there was a mistake in one of the superannuation payments, you could just put it off to the next one. It's like, you can't do that now. It's you can, but it's every pay cycle. So that's what I'm looking at, your entire systems end to end. So for us, it means like additional time clocks for people, or just different ways to do it. If you're brave, you can look at changing payroll system.
Yeah.
Might not be a good time to do it. Might be a good time to do it. I don't know. It's really up to your business, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we had also touched on like the whole qualifying earnings as well, in terms of how overtime and things like that are treated differently, or as it relates to super. So I think that, kind of speaks to changes in like awards and rulings, and obviously making sure that's all updated in BundyPlus.
Yeah, exactly. And really having that visibility to the timesheets and seeing what actually does account for overtime versus not overtime. People may not have been aware before, like overtime wasn't part of the superannuation. So yeah, some of those changes are critical. And you almost need to be like a guru to know all this information. And like at times I feel sorry for the small business owners where they've got just the one payroll person, or, at worst, it's the business owner that's also doing the pays.
Yeah.
They've got so much work on their hands to try to keep up with the legislation. So yeah, tough.
So do you think that with these changes, it'll potentially expose weaker systems or less compliant systems?
I think it definitely will. Because businesses are reporting more often. It's also the opportunity for the ATO to say, hey, why didn't you report last pay run? Whereas before it would have been, hey, why didn't you report last quarter or last month? So there'll be a lot more sort of data for the ATO to actually use to then target who are the offenders, or not even the offenders. It could be the ones that, it could be a random that they pick out. So the more data they've got, the more chances they're going to be sort of targeting you as an audit. And, let's be real, no one wants to audit anything or have their systems audited by the ATO. So yeah, I think it definitely will bring out more.
Very good. Cool. And so, for more information on all that kind of stuff, because we did discuss these in 2 separate episodes. So Payday Super, the last episode 10, and Resilience in Payroll, which would have been episode 7, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So go back and watch those for some more information or advice.
Definitely. So as far as into financial you go, like what would be your recommended sort of checklist? Like, what are the people that you're speaking to? What are they sort of checking off?
Yeah, I think, obviously, are your employee records current? Are your pay items and awards up to date, and especially in line with those regulation changes that are coming? And as that relates to overtime, the Payday Super changes, what's the approval process like in BundyPlus in terms of like transparency and from an auditing point of view? Because we mentioned earlier, the ATO already is and probably in the future is going to require even more transparency from a payroll point of view. So, that comes down to how accurately data is being tracked and approved and edited. So essentially saving yourself, asking yourself that question, like if we were to get audited, what would we, or where would we fall short, or where would we potentially be at risk of being not compliant? So I think those are the kind of key ones. Anything else there you think that I've missed or worth mentioning?
Yeah, and I think covered most of them. I think it comes back to that it's that month by month or payroll by payroll resilience that you spoke about. I mean, if you're covering them on a regular cycle and you're reviewing them, then really at the end of the financial year, it's pretty well the same process as what you've been doing. There shouldn't be any surprises then. It's like you shouldn't be reviewing it once a year is what I'm saying. You should be that continual improvement. Where do we go wrong here? What mistakes do we make? How can we correct them? That would be mine. And yeah, there can be the simple tests like if an employee asks for their clockings for the past 12 months, how easily can you give them? Because that's what the ATO are going to ask for. If one of your employees has a pay dispute, they're going to say, okay, well, they've claimed that they work here. Can you show me the records that show when they worked? So as long as those things are easily accessible and there's a decent audit trail to see who changed what, when, what are you sending them, that would be one of the key ones to make yourself audit ready too, really. Because there's a podcast I listened to and they're talking about the use of AI for workforce disputes. And what was surprising to me is that the employees are using AI as their legal advisors as well. And they, like the ChatGPTs of the world, were saying, well, you should ask this, you should ask for this, because they're looking at their regulations as well. So your employees may be asking you these questions, but they're questions that ChatGPT has asked them to ask you. So, so every employee basically has got their own little mini, workforce lawyer. So, cross all your I's, dot your T's. No, cross your T's, dot your I's, and just get that stuff in place. You're effectively, it's an insurance policy against some of these potential audits that you may have.
No, spot on. And I think that the timeliness of it being, the end of financial year and, for businesses and from an accounts and payrolls point of view, July 1st is kind of like January 1st. So it's a good time. Everyone likes a Monday for new me, new week or new me, new year. Well, as it relates to businesses, I think, 1st of July or getting ready for that change is when you want to, kind of hit the ground running with those changes or being up to par with your standards and requirements and compliance and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yep, exactly that.
And being at the end of financial year, it might also be a good time to review. Many companies are reviewing their pricing structures. So, we're going to be having a small price increase in the new fin year. So might be a time, especially if your workforce has expanded and you need to add on additional time clocks and stuff like that. Steve, what can they consider with BundyPlus and our changes?
Well, BundyPlus especially, it's kind of funny. I kind of consider a physical clock probably one of the easiest and cheapest return on investments you're going to get with your payroll. Literally for under $1,000, you can get a clock that does so much of the recording for you, some into the auditing for you, straight into your timesheet. So there may be an offer down in the bottom in the show notes there. If you see it, there might be a for end of financial deal. Just one other thing I was thinking of. It's not just your TNA. Like even this morning, I was going through some of our subscriptions and you see things like, hang on, we don't use this anymore. So there's some of those additional expenses although some things are going up, there might be some things you no longer need. So one advice I've got is grab your statement out, highlight all the things, highlight the things in green that you must have, highlight the things in orange, like I'm going to review this, or highlight in red, I don't need this thing anymore. So it's about not only reducing your costs, it's about, keeping productive and just keeping on top of things.
Yeah. Optimizing your costs. It's like, reviewing those subscriptions that you signed up for that you've totally forgotten about.
Yeah, exactly right. So, Levon, if there was one biggest thing you consider for the end of financial year or coming to the new fin year, what would it be?
ATO audits and ATO compliance. I think that's a critical one, and that's, really what this time of the year is all about. All right, so Steve, what's one thing to consider at this time of the year for businesses being end of financial year?
My stance doesn't really change much other than record everything. You just got to keep on recording everything regardless of the time of the year, because you don't know. You're not going to get audited on the 1st of July. You could be audited any time, so you have to be right all times of the year. That's my advice.
Sound advice, I reckon.
Cool. All right. Was there anything else, Levon? Or is that the wrap for this fin year?
Yeah, that's it. Happy fin year to everybody, and wishing you all the best for the new financial year and the changes that come with that.
Yep.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
Good luck with your first potential Payday Super pay run.
Yeah.
That's if you're doing it. If you haven't prepared like us.
Yeah.
Don't say we didn't warn you.
Yeah, exactly. You've been warned. Consider this an official warning.
Yep, exactly. All right, we'll catch you in the next one.
All right, no worries. Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Steve. See you in the next one.
All right.
Smarter times, stronger teams. Welcome to the BundyPlus Podcast. Welcome to the BundyPlus Podcast.